Yeah, I mean, you could see in the publicly available information that the organisation has really struggled in recent years with funding. It's been operating deficit budgets for the last few years, and as a consequence, the organisation has simply run out of cash. The reasons for that are complex. I think predominantly it's been about the impact of the many changes at the organisation, including the loss of fundraising staff, but also COVID's had an impact, as it has on most charities, and our legacy income as a proportion of our overall income has dropped as well, which has meant that we've had to rely on more traditional fundraising techniques. And again, with changes in the team and with everything that's gone on in terms of cost of living and the macroeconomics, the organisation's just been under significant pressure. So yeah, it's an area that I've got a lot of experience in, and we have launched an emergency appeal to go out to the tinnitus community and say, look, if you want this organisation to be here and continue to exist without reducing services, the vital services, then we need help. And we're calling on the tinnitus community to do whatever they can. Financial, brilliant, if it's a financial support, but help in any way they possibly can to get us through this difficult period that we find ourselves in, because I'm convinced that there's a bright future for Tinnitus UK if we can get through the next 6 months. It's hard for me to know exactly what's happened, but what I can see is that we've raised money for things like digital transformation, for a new database, for the branding that everyone can see, a new website, and obviously those things are quite expensive. So we've got to a point where we've benefited from that funding, and they're things that they're assets to the organisation which we can use to propel ourselves into the future. So I wouldn't say that funding has been lost as such, but in terms of the revenue funding, I think there's been a mismatch in recent years between how much the organisation is spending and how much we're bringing in, insofar as we've been running deficit budgets and therefore we've kind of got to a position where we've run out of cash. I think we've been running those deficit budgets for all the right reasons, as in we really want to protect the core services that the charity provides. But we're at a point now where we just simply cannot do that any longer without either additional support or without restructuring what we do as an organisation. I have launched a new process to create a new strategy. Tinnitus UK is arguably a global leader in the fight against tinnitus, and I think it's really important that we create a strategy that clarifies that for everybody, not least funders and donors and supporters, but so the tinnitus community, we can restore some faith and some hope and some inspiration that there is an organisation here that is fighting for them. And I think the organisation hasn't had a clear strategy in a while, and I think there's no coincidence that the organisation has also been struggling financially, and that's something that I'm determined to change. No, so that'll be the last thing that ever goes. And actually we're at a point already. I mean, I've been at the organisation for 3 months now, so I'm at a point where I'm confident that we've stabilised the finances. We've got a very clear picture about where we are, got a very clear picture about what we need in the next 6 months. What we don't yet have is what happens over the next 10 years. So that's what we're working really hard to create. But absolutely, services that provide support to people living with tinnitus, absolutely the last thing to go. You know, we're really proud of the fact that we haven't had to reduce them so far. There are things that we have done to reduce costs, like we've moved to digital. We've stopped printing materials for support groups, and we've stopped printing materials for professionals that are advising people on tinnitus. We need to reverse that, and there are some ways that we can save costs without impacting on the quality of the service that we're providing people. I think that's one example where we've taken it a step too far. Research is one of the three. We talk about three strands currently at the organisation: supporting people, inputting into the prevention or the campaigns behind prevention of people getting tinnitus or damaging their hearing. And then the third is research, and I know the organisation has been a global leader in funding research in the past. In the last few years, our financial capability has been limited, but we do have in our scientific advisory board some of the world's leading researchers in this field, and it will be part of the new strategy to decide exactly what we do with research. But I can see it being a big part of what we do in the future in terms of researching for a cure, but also researching into treatments for tinnitus. I mean, simply not enough is being done, and we want to do something about that. So it'll be a big part of our organisational strategy, I'm sure about that. That's a good question. Obviously, I'm not going to give all my secrets away. But primarily it's about demonstrating the impact that you can have on people with the services that you provide as a charity. At the moment we don't really understand that because our helpline's anonymous. Many of our services are, it's a one-way communication. We provide support to 75 support groups around the UK. At this stage we don't know who goes to those support groups, let alone what impact it's having on their lives. So that's something we can change pretty quickly. So we're creating a theory of change or a logic model to understand the impact of what we do, the power of what Tinnitus UK does. Once we understand that, we can communicate it in a much more compelling and effective way to people that are supporting us or would like to support us, people that would like to do something about tinnitus. I've had tinnitus for 11 years. I've always wanted to support an organisation that is doing something about tinnitus, but nobody has ever really spoken to me. I want to speak to people like me and demonstrate really clearly the impact of somebody's support. And I think once we do that, we'll have a transformational impact on our voluntary income. I have a very high pitch whistling sound, so it's tinnitus, not pulsatile tinnitus or anything like that. I've had it for 11 years. I woke up with it one day, like many people. Went to my GP who knew nothing about tinnitus, referred me to ENT. This will be a familiar story to millions of people. I had an MRI scan to rule out a brain tumour, and then that was it. I didn't even get a leaflet. A lot of people get a leaflet at that stage. I didn't even get the leaflet, but I got told that there was nothing that could be done, and I just had to live with it. And luckily I have managed to do that. Every now and then it sort of gets the better of me, and particularly with sleep. But that's not good enough, and that hasn't changed in the 11 years since I was diagnosed with tinnitus. And actually now I'm getting out and speaking to people in our support groups and other mechanisms. I'm understanding that this is a very, very common issue, and one that we need to do something about. It's simply not good enough. And luckily there's a Tinnitus UK to help people.